Hello, welcome to part 6 in the series of videos on supersymmetry patterns. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to practice finding them. We want to be able to find these because they're so important. So let's first review what a supersymmetry pattern is, and then we're going to practice finding them. What is a supersymmetry pattern? It's a minimum of how many planets? 4. And what are those 4 planets doing? Have you answered the question? Just we're reviewing here. Those 4 planets are 4 or more planets are making at least 2 midpoint structures. So to review, a supersymmetry pattern is 4 or more planets making 2 or more midpoint structures. And what we're showing on this slide is 4 different ways that you can get a 4-planet supersymmetry pattern. So this slide is showing us only 4-planet supersymmetry patterns. We can have 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. But if you only have 4, which is the minimum, there are 4 different ways that you can get a 4-planet supersymmetry pattern. Again, 4 ways to get a 4-planet supersymmetry pattern. Once you get to 5 planets, there are so many different ways that you can get a 5-planet supersymmetry pattern that we do not distinguish the different kinds of supersymmetry patterns when there are 5 or more planets, other than you could mention if it's a string. So the only distinction between supersymmetry patterns that are made of 5 or more planets is whether it is a string or not. That's it. So you got the idea? If it's 4 planets, let me say this again. If you have a 4-planet supersymmetry pattern and you want to be specific, you can specify whether it's a string or a pyramid, and you can also specify what kind of pyramid it is, whether it's a simple pyramid, an opposition pyramid, or a double opposition pyramid. That's up to you to be as specific as you want to. Kind of stumbled on my words, so let me say that again. If it's a 4-planet configuration, you can specify whether it's a string or a pyramid. And if it's a pyramid, if you want to, you can say whether it's a simple pyramid, opposition pyramid, or double opposition pyramid. How specific you want to be is up to you. You can just call it a 4-planet superstring pattern, or you can be more specific. That's up to you. When you get to 5 planets, we can call it a 5-planet superstring a 5-planet superstring pattern. Can we be more specific? If we have 5 planets in a superstring pattern, that means the 5 planets are making 3 or more midpoints. Can we be more specific? The only level of detail that we use in common communication is if it happens to be a string, you could say it's a 5-planet string. Otherwise, we do not usually distinguish them. We could if we want to. We could start giving names to all these kinds of 5- and 6-planet superstring patterns, but then you end up with this huge vocabulary you have to memorize. And we've decided to keep this relatively simple. Let's keep it simple, but let's not ignore some really fundamental important things. Okay, so just reviewing here and filling in some details, and then we're going to practice finding them. So to review again, the images of the planetary configurations on the previous slide show the 4-planet supersymmetry patterns, and we identified specifically what kind of supersymmetry pattern each one of those is. When 5 or more planets are involved, it is most common to just refer to them as supersymmetry patterns. So you would just say it's a 5-planet supersymmetry pattern, or if there are 6 planets, you call it a 6-planet supersymmetry pattern, etc. The only exception, well, no, it's not an exception. That's what we usually do. But if you want to be more specific, then you could specify that it's a string if it's a string. But typically, that's all we do. We just say how many planets there are. You can also refer to all 4 planetary configurations shown on the previous slide simply as 4-planet supersymmetry patterns. You can keep it simple and just refer to all these as supersymmetry patterns. Now, an easy way to use this terminology is this. If you notice that a configuration is a string, you happen to notice that it's a string. Sometimes you won't notice it's a string, because how do you see these? You see them by looking at the midpoint trees. You remember that from the previous video in this series. Let me say that again. How are you going to find these superstring patterns? You're going to find them by looking at the midpoint trees. When you look at the midpoint trees are not going to make it obvious that it's a string. Usually you only notice that it's a string when you start looking at the chart wheel. So if you do not notice that it's a string, no problem. You just call it a superstring pattern. But if you happen to notice that it's a string, then you can state that it's a string. You can state it's a 4-planet string, 5-planet string, whatever it happens to be. And that's nice. It's, more specific. Otherwise, just refer to the planetary configuration as a supersymmetry pattern, and you can state how many, you have to state how many planets are in the supersymmetry pattern to communicate clearly, because there's a huge difference between a 4-planet supersymmetry pattern and a 5-planet. You want to specify how many planets are in the supersymmetry pattern. So to keep it simple, just specify supersymmetry pattern and how many planets are in it. And this third point I've already said, so let's go on. And the fourth point I've already said, always specify how many planets are in the supersymmetry pattern. Okay. So in regard to pyramids, just to repeat this one more time, and then we're going to start looking at how to find these things. If you say something like there's a Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn pyramid in Maria's chart, that's how we say it. That's a typical way to say it. There is a Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn pyramid in Maria's chart. Is that okay to say? Let's review. Is that good communication? Yes or no? Yes. Very good communication. She has a Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn pyramid in her chart. What am I not telling you in that communication? Just like a quiz. Okay? Got a little quiz here. Because, when you hear it, it can all be clear, but not think for yourself. What did we not say? What we did not say is whether it's a simple pyramid, an opposition pyramid, or a double opposition pyramid. And in bold, I said it is okay for this to be unclear. I mean, you didn't even have to say it's a pyramid. You could have just said it's a 4-planet symmetry pattern, supersymmetry pattern. So that's up to you how much detail you want to give or are even aware of. So if you wish to specify that this is not an opposition pyramid or a double opposition pyramid, so then you say there is a Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn simple pyramid. I put simple pyramid in bold. You can add the word simple to the statement and make it clear that it's a simple pyramid. So if you say simple pyramid, it makes it clear that this is a pyramid in which both aspects are conjunctions. The aspects in both midpoint structures are conjunctions. Okay, now we're going to start finding supersymmetry patterns. And remember that the rule is you look at a midpoint tree. There are 3 planets in the midpoint tree. Look at other midpoint trees, not the same midpoint tree, must be in a different midpoint tree, and see if there are 2 planets in common in the other midpoint structure. So we're going to practice doing this by looking at midpoint trees for a chart and determine if there is a supersymmetry pattern. And in the process of doing this, we're going to learn some additional terminology. So this is practice, but the practice is going to open up awareness of a few more possible things. Okay, here we go. There are the midpoint structures for my 17 vibration chart. That's what you will see when you run the Sirius software, and if you select only conjunctions and oppositions with a 1.5 degree orb, this is what you will see. Now, are there any superstring patterns? Look at it and tell me, are there any there? Whoa. I explained it, but now your eyes may glaze over. I don't know. What do I do? What you do is pick out a midpoint tree. Any one. I mean, you got a lot to choose from. Just pick one. I picked the one with the fairly small orb. I've got two with small orbs. Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune at Mercury, Mars. For no particular reason, I selected this one. You can select any of them. It doesn't matter. I happen to select one with one of the small orbs, but select any midpoint structure. So that may sound strange, but just arbitrarily select one. So you look at a midpoint structure in a midpoint tree, and then step number 2, see if there is a midpoint structure in a different midpoint tree with two of the same planets. Okay, so we arbitrarily, for no particular reason, we're going to use Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars. Now, question. Is Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars part of a supersymmetry pattern? Answer is on the next slide. You can, I'll count to 5, and if that's not enough time, pause the video, think about it, and see what the answer is. So I'll count to 5. To answer this question, is Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars midpoint part of a supersymmetry pattern? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next slide. Yes, it is. Because Mercury is opposition Venus, Mars. What are the two planets in common? Mercury and Mars. So you just have to look. Look carefully. At some point, we're going to have this software find these things and so on. But even when we do, it's going to be very good. We're still going to have to learn this because you can't appreciate what software is doing if you don't really appreciate what it's doing, and you can appreciate it by going through it carefully. So, and plus it's actually not that difficult to find. Once you get used to this, you spot them right away. I mean, you just look it over. You'll be surprised probably at how quickly you'll notice them. So Neptune is opposition Mercury, Mars. Mercury is opposition Venus, Mars. They both have Mercury, Mars in common. Both orbs are fairly small. 14 minutes, very tight. 37 minutes, solid, strong. This is important. This is in my 17 vibration chart. That is very important. That's going to give, you might say, a talent or a motivation. Maybe it's a problem. Maybe it's not so much a talent. It's an energy. It's something going on that's going to give me the ability to do something for better or worse. That's a good way to describe any planetary configuration from the vibrational astrology viewpoint. So there it is. Extremely important planetary configuration. Why? Because 4 planets are involved and there are 2 midpoint structures. It's a supersymmetry pattern. Okay. So there it is. Now, does it go out to 5 planets or 6 planets? So there are 2 other midpoint structures and other midpoint trees that have 2 planets in common with Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars. I put a red rectangle around one of them and the number 2 next to it. Okay, so there's a third one. There's a third one that has Mercury and Mars, and maybe that's what you noticed. You might have noticed the other one. I just happened to point out this one. So if we look carefully, oh, by the way, before we go on, yeah, there it is. Well, let me show you. There's the third one. Mars opposition Mercury, Uranus. So there are 3 midpoint structures that have Mercury, Mars. Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars, midpoint. Mercury opposition Venus, Mars, midpoint. And Mars opposition Mercury, Uranus, midpoint. And we're going to look at what's going on there. But before we do, let's look at these 2 midpoint structures. There's the Neptune opposition Mercury, Mars midpoint. I showed this actually in the previous slide. Not previous slide, previous video. Neptune is opposition Mercury, Mars midpoint. Mercury opposition Venus, Mars midpoint. And what do you notice? Do you notice something interesting? This is a double opposition pyramid is the kind of pyramid we're looking at here. Do you notice something interesting about this? Mercury's in Capricorn, Venus and Neptune are in Taurus, Mars is in Virgo. These are the 4 planets. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Neptune. They're all in Earth signs, and they're all kind of trine to each other. Some are within orb of being trine, some not. Mercury is trine Neptune, for example, with a 3-degree orb. And some are almost trines, they're out of orb, using the orbs we use in VA. What happens is if you have 4 or more planets that are close to being trine to each other, sometimes one planet is at the midpoint of 2 others, and that's exactly what we have now. So you'll see some astrologers, like modern Western astrologers, will look at something like this and they will say, this describes me. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Neptune, your orbs in VA are too small. You need bigger orbs because this is so strong. And when I get transits over it and progressions, things happen. You know what's happening? The reason why this grand trine is so strong is because it's reinforced with 2 strong midpoint structures. So it's not that Venus at 4 Taurus is making a solid trine to Mars at 15 Virgo. In VA, we would say they're not trine at all. There's nothing going on between Venus and Mars regarding trine. But what's happening is all 4 planets making 2 midpoint structures. They're in a supersymmetry pattern, more specifically, a double opposition pyramid. And this happens sometimes. You'll notice this in other charts. Anyway, it's fun to look at the actual chart wheel. After you see in the midpoint structures what's going on, it's fun to look at it and see, oh wow, that's what's happening. It's just one way that a supersymmetry pattern can happen, but it happens to be the one way that's going on here. Now, that 3rd midpoint structure that has Mercury and Mars. So here are the 3. You might have noticed this one first, or maybe you noticed both of them right away. 3 midpoint structures with Mercury and Mars. So Mars is opposition Mercury-Uranus, and Uranus, which is way out here at 23 Taurus. I'm saying way out there at 23 Taurus because in VA, Uranus is not trine to anything. We allow a little over a 5-degree orb, but you get these planets all close to being trine, and you can end up with another planet at a midpoint structure, and Mars is opposition Mercury-Uranus midpoint with a 55-minute orb. That's solid. It's there. It's under a degree orb. Not ultra strong, but it's solid. This is a very solid planetary configuration. This is strong. This is important. What do you call it? What are you going to call this planetary configuration? Simplest thing to do, simplest thing is just call it supersymmetry. Just call it a 5-planet supersymmetry pattern. Even better is to call it a 5-planet, 3-midpoint supersymmetry pattern. Just makes it clear, no ambiguity. It's 5 planets, 3 midpoints, but for short, you can just call it a 5-planet. 5-planet supersymmetry pattern. Wow. Sometimes if you're saying that, the person listening to you may not remember or know how many midpoints structures there are. That's why I often like to say it's a 5-planet, 3-midpoint. Midpoint here means midpoint structure. Just because we want to, we're too lazy, as always, to say all these words. So we call it a 5-planet, 3-midpoint supersymmetry pattern. It's already pretty long. 5-planet, 3-midpoint supersymmetry pattern. Sometimes people drop the word super, and you can do that too. You can say, I have a 5-planet, 3-midpoint symmetry pattern. But you know what? If you say symmetry pattern, it can be a little bit vague because symmetry pattern, we use the word symmetry in other schools of astrology. It's used in a lot of different contexts in VA to mean, anytime you have symmetry. So it really helps to say the whole thing. 5 planet, 3 midpoint, supersymmetry pattern. That's what we're looking at. And really, that's the only term for this. That's it. We don't get more detailed. I mean, if you want to describe it, you can, but we don't have particular terminology. So you can say we have a 5 planet, 3 midpoint supersymmetry pattern, and the 5 planets are all in Earth signs. That's a cool way to get very detailed. And then if you're an advanced student of VA, which you now are, we're getting into advanced pattern recognition here, then it's one of those trine kind of things. They're not necessarily within orb of being trine, but they're lining up in just the right spot. The interesting thing, Uranus is out of orb of trining anything, but it's at the perfect spot to make another midpoint structure. Even more perfect is if this orb got smaller, but it's perfect enough to get a third midpoint structure. And I've shown that one with green, with circles instead of rectangle kind of things, just because it gets hard to draw these things. I mean, you end up with a mess. So I've tried to draw this in a way that you could see all 3 midpoint structures, the purple one, the orange one, and the green one, and how they reinforce each other. This is a very powerful planetary configuration because it is a 5 planet, 3 midpoint supersymmetry pattern, and all 3 midpoints are under a degree orb. It's solid. It's not overpowering. It's not the strongest configuration in all of my charts, but it's a darn strong one, and that means it should show up. When a configuration is this strong, you can talk about it to the client. What we recommend in VA is you talk to the client, you ask questions or give the reading or however you like to do it by bringing up the biggies. This is big enough that you could start talking about it as one of the major things going on. And that's why the VA consultation is so amazing, because you pick up on the biggest things. In a minute, maybe it's in the next video, but I will interpret this. We will interpret this. So you could start thinking, what do you think it means? 17 vibe. What does 17 vibe do? What does it mean to have a Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune? You can just take the 5 planets. You can think about the specific midpoint structures, but essentially we're talking about a Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune, 17 vibe. What feeling do you get about that? Those 5 planets serving 17 vibe, as we often say, they only are doing 17 vibe. Don't start interpreting Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune in general. Think of it in 17 vibe specifically, because they're only doing 17 vibe here. So the vibration is what we're talking about, and you don't want to step outside the vibration because it's only working in this vibration. Sometimes beginning vibrational astrology students start interpreting the planets and then they think, I'll add in the vibration later. No, you can do that in your thought process, but don't start saying that to a client, because if you start describing the planets not related to the vibration, it can be a little bit off. You can do that to develop your thoughts about it, but communicate your conclusion. What does it mean to be in that vibration? We'll talk about it. We'll go over that. Now, there's a 4th midpoint structure. Before I go there, maybe I should have asked you first, so see if you could find it. How would you find if there's a 4th midpoint structure tied into this? Well, the more planets you have, the more likely it is that you'll find another one. You know why? Because we have 5 planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune. If another midpoint structure has any 2 of those 5 planets, it is in the configuration as well. So what happens sometimes is you can get 7 or 8 planets in a supersymmetry pattern. Because now that I've got 5, it's going to be not that difficult, just probability-wise, for there to be another midpoint structure that has one of those 5 planets, that has 2 of those 5 planets. So does this one have Mercury? Let's look at our list. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune. It has the Venus and Uranus. So this midpoint structure has the Venus, excuse me, which appears in this midpoint structure. It has Uranus, which appears in this midpoint structure. It's fine that they appear in only one of them. Venus is on only one midpoint structure. Uranus is on only one of the midpoint structures, one of the 3 midpoint structures that make up this supersymmetry pattern. That's fine. No problem. So the rule is, do you see 2 of the 3 planets in one of the midpoint structures that is already part of the supersymmetry pattern? In this case, the 3 midpoint structures, yes. Venus at Saturn, Uranus. And then we can look at the last one and see if it also does. Well, there's 2 more, but let's see what I found as the 4th one. Yes, the 4th one I selected was this one. You might notice another one, but I'm just going to go in the order that you're going to end up with the same answer, no matter which one you happen to find next. So Venus at Saturn, Uranus, that's very weak at 1 degree 24 minutes. It is within the 1.5 degrees. I put that in blue. My wheel is starting to look like a mess. I mean, there's so many. You've got the purple, the orange, the green, and the blue. 4. I think it's actually pretty clear. You can actually look at all that. And you know, when you look at this wheel, you can do like a little meditative, feel this. Feel that the Mercury-Uranus, let's look at the green. Mercury-Uranus making that symmetry with Mars. Mercury-Uranus to Mars in 17 vibration. And then at the same time, let's go, I'm just picking randomly, let's go to the orange. Venus and Mars going to Mercury. They're resonating with Mercury. And then you can go to the purple, and Mercury and Mars making this resonance with Neptune. And then Saturn and Uranus making this resonance with Venus. All of those symmetries going on in different directions are all tied together. They're all tied. That's why we call it a supersymmetry pattern. We're using the term supersymmetry, which is also used in physics in a different way, a different meaning than is in physics. I mean, it's vaguely related, but that's fine. We do this all the time. We use same terms in different contexts to have, somewhat different meanings. But anyway, you've probably heard supersymmetry in a different context in terms of physics, but quantum theory. But here, it's this is what it means within the context of vibrational astrology. So, any planet, just to read the last sentence on this slide, any planet in any of the midpoint structures that we've already included in our supersymmetry pattern is included in the list of planets that we're considering. So there's a 4th one. Is there a 5th one? Well, now you can see we now have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Actually, that's Mercury through Neptune with no, never mind. We skipped Jupiter. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. So do any of the other midpoint structures have two of those? Let's see which one I pick next. I picked the Uranus at Jupiter Saturn. So Uranus at Jupiter Saturn has Uranus, which is in the Venus at Saturn Uranus. It has, and it has Saturn, which is also at the Venus Saturn Uranus. So this has two in common here. And here's Uranus again. You may see a planet show up in more than one at this point. So Uranus and Saturn appear in other midpoint, in one or more of the other midpoint structures. So this is a fifth one. You may have numbered them if you did this on your own. You may number them completely differently. You could have started out with a different midpoint structure. It doesn't matter what order you go in. You're going to get the same midpoint structures no matter where you start and end. So Uranus at Jupiter Saturn, I did that in brown with circles. It's in here. Another symmetry. Rather weak with a 1 degree 15 minute order, but it is there. Okay, any planet that's in these midpoint structures, we now have a long list. What do we have? Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. That's a lot of planets. Are they here? Yes, Jupiter and Uranus are here. There's a sixth midpoint structure. By the way, I've listed them here as well in the midpoint on the wheel. Anyway, the sixth one going in this order, Jupiter conjunct Uranus, Pluto, and that's a strong one. And what color did I put that in? Jupiter at Uranus, Pluto. I put that in light blue. That's this light blue rectangle. Light blue. Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto. So there they are. We have how many midpoint structures? We have 6 midpoint structures, and if you count the number of planets, there are 8 planets. What do we call this giant configuration? We call it an 8-planet, 6 midpoint supersymmetry pattern. Right? That's it. And it's extremely important. Some of the orbs just, way out there. Venus and Saturn is 1 degree 24 minutes. This one not super strong. But given the number of planets and given the fact that 2 of them have, the 13 and 14 minute orb, another one at 37 minute orb. So 3 of them strong, 2 super strong, 1 really strong, another under a degree, and 2 kind of weak. Degree 15 minutes and degree 24 minutes very weak. So a lot of strength in there, a couple of weaker ones. This is a very solid, strong configuration. Very important, and it will play a part in the person's personality. And this is something that the person should use. The person is me. I'm using me because you're listening to me. If you're a student of VA, maybe too much. So you have some sense of what I'm about. Over time you start learning more about a person, and then we can judge whether it makes sense. And I find that it works better with actual real people. What we found with famous people is it works with them too, but sometimes we don't know the real them. One of the things we found in our research is that if it's a person who's fairly contemporary, now that we have YouTube videos and things, and you watch a video, so many times we've done research on someone and we say, I don't see this configuration, because we only know them the way the biographers and the articles describe the person. And as soon as they're interviewed, you go, oh my God, this is so obvious. It is totally obviously strong. So the point is, we don't always know about the person, and they may have something that's extremely strong for them they're not showing publicly. Anyway, we don't know everything about public people, so sometimes it's there, but it's not obvious. Usually you can tell, but not always. But with a person that you can talk to, you can find out from them what it is they do, then you can confirm it. Anyway, this is a big pattern, and I think the interpretation is next, and we'll leave that. Yeah, The interpretation is next. Let's start. We're at 35 minutes now in this video. This is a perfect place to stop. We will do our next video. If I've lost count here, I think this is our 6th. Is that what I said? So it'll be our 7th video in this series, and we will interpret this. So I'm just looking to see what slide we're on. We're going to end up with 7 or 8, maybe 9 videos in the series. So anyway, next video, what does it mean? Okay, we'll interpret it, and I believe there's some other things we're going to cover as well. We'll see. Okay, I'll see you in the next video in the series. God bless. Namaste.